Welcome to our 79th podcast. Today we'll continue our discussion about adaptable organizations. In this episode, we talk about how organizational designs, policies, and processes can enable or block adaptability. This is the third in a 4-part series. What's one thing you can do now to help your organization bend before it breaks? Keep listening to find out.
Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces.
Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. Welcome back to the podcast. We're so happy that you joined us today. I'm Rich Cruz, an organizational development consultant, and I'm joined by my co-host, Ben Kleinman. Hey, Ben, how are you?
Hey, everyone. Doing well, thank you. How are you?
And Ben, we are going to be talking about adaptability. This is for the third time in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Digging even deeper, exploring ever further.
That's right. Cool. Well, so we were kind of, as we were going back and forth in the notes a little bit here, talking about flexibility versus adaptability, and some of the, the ways organizations are designed, and all the things that make up an organization, their processes, their policies, all that stuff, the structural part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought maybe we would jump into how can we identify when things might be, I don't know, too rigid, right?
Yeah.
Or on the opposite side, like they're so loosey goosey that
Too wet noodle.
Yeah, right. And that we've seen a lot of that.
Yeah. And just to sort of tie the link with last episode, at the end of our last podcast, we did sort of tee up a little bit of what's coming next, or a little bit of I don't want to call it a cliffhanger, but maybe a soon-to-be type of episode where we're talking about whether there are certain functional units, maybe standing functional units, should they be adaptable in the same way that a product innovation team or a short-term project team is adaptable? Are they adaptable but in different ways? Is there too much adaptability in one versus the other? How do you get each of those teams to become more adaptable in the right way? So I think that what you teed up fits in perfectly, because at the end of the day, it's all about how do we design our organizations and support our existing structures, create new structures to make the organization and the teams and the people as adaptable as possible.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Right. Well, I just saw the other day, so Dan Pinkham, who we had on the podcast.
Yeah, a previous guest of ours.
Right.
We are lucky to have had him on the show.
Absolutely. He uses our podcast video clips all the time on his social media. That's awesome. Yay. Thanks, Dan. But he's a Lean Six Sigma black belt, right?
Yeah.
And so for anybody who doesn't know, that is all about reducing waste, creating efficiencies, trying to get to what is it? It's 6 standard deviations off the
it's essentially reducing your error rate and getting your operations to a point where they function as efficiently as possible within a very, very strict band that allows you to have like 3 parts per million or something along that are not within your tolerance. So you can think about it as three service calls that go wrong out of 1 million service calls, or 3 widgets that don't get built right out of 1 million widgets. I mean, it's a very, very small error rate.
Right.
So that's that whole discipline is designed around building these systems to operate as efficiently as possible.
Exactly. Right. And so in his recent post, was talking about standardizing your processes to create that predictable
Mm-hmm.
outcome.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, Ben, there's that productivity part where that standardization um, comes into play and maybe arguably should be rigid until it can't be, right? Until those parts per million are going up, right? Then you have to change, adapt. But then there's also those functional teams where they're more
Mm-hmm.
innovative, where
Mm-hmm.
you don't have that. You
Right.
don't have that. You're actually encouraging mistakes, and just to some extent. I
Learnings,
mean,
yeah.
learning,
Sort
right,
of
right,
testing, seeing what works, doing that in a fairly quick cycle, learning as much
yeah,
as you can as quickly as possible. Um,
right,
Not just throwing spaghetti at the wall, but somewhat educated guesses and then learning from each of those guesses as
right.
quickly
Or
as
what?
possible. You don't want to keep repeating the same failures and whatnot. But yeah, I think there's a fair bit in there that we could unpack.
Sure. So I know one of the things like this week in my class, we're going to be talking about organizational structures, and we've talked about organizational structures in the past here, right? But when we think about that, we often think about the org chart,
Yeah,
this hierarchy,
right.
you know, the the top dog at the
Boss bet
top
at the
there.
top,
That's right.
Hermes
Yes.
somewhere at
Yep.
the bottom.
Uh, that poor guy. uh, and all those little hamsters and gerbils that you know make up that workplace.
Yeah.
But but there are other organizational designs that and organizations can and probably have, whether they intended or not, probably have some of these other structures within them that happen either intentionally or organically, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think almost naturally you're going to see some of that evolve as a business grows and as you have more people involved and as you take on a little bit more activity and do more things, you're just going to have these things that are naturally on that gradient of very, very flexible to very, very rigid.
Mhm.
And
Right.
that only makes sense. You'd want
Sure.
some reliability and confidence that the widgets that you're making, once you know that design is the right design, however you're defining that, you'd want to know that those are being made fairly consistently, whether
Yep.
that's a cereal that you're making for people to eat or medicine that you're making for people to take or just an iPhone or something like that. I mean, you just want to know that there's some quality there. And
Right.
that could be very different from a more innovative project team, that kind of a thing.
Right. Even when you go into things like policing and firefighting and paramedics, there are very rigid procedures that you have to go through
Hmm.
for not only compliance but safety.
Sure. Sure.
That's why we have a lot of these systems in place. That may not seem like they're the most efficient in the sense of getting through something, right? But it prevents us from having a lack of quality of whatever we're doing, right? So we're meeting the needs of
Hmm.
saving somebody's life, for instance.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
those are great examples of where you might have a fairly structured process, but within that process, there is quite a bit of variability
Right.
when a when an EMT shows up, an emergency medical technician shows up at a scene. They might have some idea based on what the caller called in about what's happening. Someone might be having a heart attack or someone skinned their knee or whatever, but you don't really know what's happening with that patient or that person until you get on scene and is this person um, how are they presenting? What's going on with the situation? And so you might have protocols to teach you how to do certain things or stay safe or resolve the situation, put out the fire. But within that, you don't know until you get there what you're dealing with. And so
Right.
there's that's, I think, where some of the art of those disciplines comes in terms of how are you going to best treat the patient? How are you best going to put the fire out? All of those kinds of things. And so within that, there needs to be some, I don't know if it's flexibility or adaptability or judgment in terms of how you apply the best practices to get that outcome to heal the patient or get the patient safely transferred to a hospital or get the fire under control or what have you.
Right. Well, I think one of the things that I've personally experienced, I don't know about you, but I've gone through some like first aid, CPR, AED training,
Yeah,
right? But you are drilled on various different circumstances, right? Somebody has an electric shock, somebody has some yeah, I'm going this has turned into a dark topic. All of a
this
sudden.
is not the dark triad episode, friends.
Right, right. But the reality is, like, let's even say, we're talking about a manufacturing situation, right? Where um, you're creating a product and there's these different stages, and you've learned along the lines that there are parts that can break down, or
Sure.
something can go awry. But to understand and drill that and build the skills to be able to quickly identify what needs to happen,
Hmm.
and then change your behavior to
Right.
match that, right?
Right. And some of that is experience, and some of
Yeah,
that is historical knowledge and maybe institutional knowledge and applying best practices and whatnot. But it could be variability in terms of the machine as well. And I think we've talked about that a little bit in prior
yeah,
episodes in terms of
sure,
you need people who can look at a machine, and if the machine is not producing the widget correctly, know how to tweak the machine. And there's the written machine instructions, and there might be a machine
right,
help desk that you can call, but then there's the how do you jiggle the pinball machine the right way to get the 100-point bonus. And so there's a little bit of that kind of know-how that is a little bit more of that sort of flexible um, kind of application maybe of knowledge. And that's not something that you can give someone a framework for how to troubleshoot, but to know what to apply when, I think you can't write all of that down. It's just too
right,
vast and too
right,
variable too.
sure, sure. So we have, to some extent, right? You threw out the first acronym, EMT.
I sure
So
did.
you sure did, and you very deftly
I
uh,
think that's
did
2
did the.
episodes in a row now where I've thrown out the first acronym, which is probably 2 more than the prior 77
That's
episodes.
probably right. But I'm going to throw out one now. SOPs, right? Standard operating procedures. And so those are those, like you said, those written,
Mhm,
they can be, I've seen them in binders. I've seen them in things like SharePoint from
mhm.
Microsoft, if you're in that, or
Yeah,
some other knowledge base, right?
yeah.
But,
Internal
uh,
knowledge bases,
right.
intranets, things like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
digital, electronic. Um, I just a cool thing. I've seen it where a lot of times on manufacturing floors, they're starting to put on handhelds, whether it's a
Mm,
tablet that workers can use around the floor or managers can use on the floor, and they can kind of see in real time maybe a parts diagram and an SOP, so they have everything right there to know how to build it, how to fix it, what
right.
the tolerances are, that kind of thing. It's so
Absolutely.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually at in Chicago here. We had FabTech last week, which is a big manufacturing convention, right,
Mhm.
or conference,
Yeah,
and so many like huge machines and all that. But it was the software that I found fascinating because, like you said, Ben, there's all this software that is now cloud based, where
right,
your
right.
standard operating procedures, your parts diagrams, wire diagrams, where things can break down in the process, all of that funnels into something where you can identify what it is, fix it, and we'll.
And a lot of companies are moving to predictability there, so, or even preventive maintenance, so they can say this machine's been operating for X number of hours. You need to add some oil, or this machine's been operating for X number of years. You need to replace X, Y, or Z. Or they can identify parts that are failing faster or that are wearing down in a certain way. Those kinds of things, the sensors that they have on these machines, and it's all cloud-based. No, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. But it's that the other part of it, though, is that tacit knowledge that doesn't get captured. Although, arguably, with some of the artificial intelligence that's out there, we are getting this feedback that takes that tacit knowledge and actually puts it into something that can be retrieved again, right? But it's that stuff that's not written down. Like I said, it's very tribal, right? Like people just know that, I gotta be the Fonz and bump this machine in a certain way to make it work.
Hey,
Love you, Henry Winkler.
wow.
Yeah. Did I tell you I actually saw him just a couple of years ago?
No.
He's so funny on stage. It's incredible.
Wow. That's all right. There we go. That's a podcast for a different day.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that was fun. But why don't we do this, Ben? Because we're about that time where we need to take a break. When we come back, let's talk a little bit more about structure and what can organizations do, to be more adaptable.
I like it.
Okay. We'll be right back. Dysfunctional organizational cultures and poorly managed transformations can devastate employee morale and motivation, leading to disengaged employees, poor work quality, and the loss of your best people. The impacts to your organization include high costs, low productivity, and wasted resources. At Harmonious Workplaces, our purpose is to help you build the best workplace possible. We are advisors applying proven organizational development and industrial organizational psychology methodologies to help you become your best organization. We are doers, using time-tested principles to help you execute organizational change initiatives smoothly and successfully. To discover how Harmonious Workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. And we're back. All right, Ben. We need to define some things, right? We've talked a little bit about flexibility. We talked about adaptability. How do you define these
Well, I think
things?
before we go into designing the perfect organization, maybe we just define some of these terms that we've been kicking around kind of loosely, and then that will help us think through how we build those structures, and then how building those structures and fostering an environment of adaptability can get us to a point where the organization is more resilient, and where that resilience can really pay dividends down the road.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So flexibility, the way I was thinking about flexibility is that it's more of a short-term situational adjustment or a tactical kind of adjustment. So where that typically works well is in an operational setting. And so if we were talking about machines and making widgets and things like that. If your machine breaks down, you have some structured processes to go through or troubleshooting that you can do, but there's going to be some flexibility in terms of we may fix it one way, we may fix it another way. It's going to depend on how badly a part is broken or where it's worn down or what we have in store and how quickly we need to get it up and running. Do we just Band-Aids, duct tape, and chewing gum to get the last run done? Or can we have this down for a few days and really do the internal rebuild? So there's some flexibility in how you apply that.
And some
The
things that you just to add on to this,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
some
yeah.
things you threw out there that stand out to me is, so, from a management perspective, right, we have it's about resource allocation, and so it's, uh, being flexible with our scheduling, being flexible with how we, what resources we allocate to here or there. The other thing to either, fix or get things back on track.
In
Does
a
that
little
track?
bit more of maybe a shorter term or
Short term, yeah.
situational time frame
Right.
as
So
opposed to
it's kind of contingent in a way. It's like contingency planning to some effect. Yeah.
to some degree, yeah. I think it's a little more situation based,
Hmm.
um, in the sense that you can assume that your plant might need repairs at some point. If you
Sure.
own a house or live in an apartment, you know that you're gonna have to fix the plumbing at some point, or you're gonna have to get a new roof at some point. You don't know
Yeah.
exactly when, you don't know how much of the repair is gonna have to be done, how big the problem is, but you just know that's coming. So you can
Sure.
kind of plan for it, but you don't know until the plumbing breaks what's going on, or the
What's
pipe
going on?
leaks, where the
Right.
leak is, how big that's going to be, how that fix is going to get fixed, those kinds of things. So it's a little more, I think about it, and I could be way wrong. Please tell me,
No, I think
but
I'm
it
totally
it
Jack.
it sort of feels a little more situation based, whereas adaptability I think of as a little bit more of a long term, more strategic type of a change, or a strategic type of mentality. So if that flexibility is more situational, short term, tactical,
Hmm.
the application of that flexibility in the broader, longer term strategic sense might be adaptability. And so where that's good is if you're looking at a market and the market is changing, can you move into that newer market space quicker?
Right.
Can you move into that newer market space more efficiently than competitors? Can you do it in a way that's more exciting to consumers, in a way that's better than your competitors? So
Sure.
there's some flexibility, but at a slightly larger scale or a longer time frame, or maybe more resources are required. It's that sort of thing that
Hmm.
I think of.
Yeah. A little before we started this episode,
Yeah.
this brings to mind to me, like in the arts, um, where flexibility is when I put this in a musical context, right? Where we're learning something and we're learning a piece of music or going through it, and um, we find that there's a problem, so we go back and we fix it, and we might drill it a little bit, to get it where it's right. Um, so for like the next performance, we're set and we're flexible enough to be able to handle it. Whereas to be adaptable, having learned how to do that over the course of all these different types of parts, you can actually become improvisational to some extent, right? Where you can now, anticipate some of the changes a little bit more. You can when you experience something like in the context of, again, music, like if you hit a certain chord change, you actually can almost, instinctively change the way you express what you do, or the note choice that you make or whatever it is to fit in that type of situation. Does that does that
That's
track
cool.
at all?
That's really cool. You're making me think maybe that with flexibility, you can design a little bit of flexibility, and you can design a little bit of adaptability
Right.
in your situations, in your organizations, and we'll I think come to that design part in a moment. But what I'm wondering is there an intentionality that you
Right.
bake into the system with adaptability, that longer term strategic resilience of the organization? You're sort of in an ideal state. You're baking in the ability for the organization to adapt to certain situations in a way that's better, less resistance, less waste, less inefficiency,
Right.
more interesting market outcomes to customers, you're doing that in a way that's better than competitors.
Mm-hmm.
And you're setting your organization up so there's some intentionality to saying, we want to be an organization that is so adaptable that if a market shifts a little bit, it's easy for us to react to that change positively.
Sure.
So we're going to design our systems, we're going to design our widgets, we're going to design our services to be able to do that. And some of that is flexible systems or flexible teams. And some of that is the adaptability of the organization, the intent. Does that make any sense, or am I just kind of way
No,
off?
it does. It does. It does for sure. And it also makes me think about um, in order to be able to facilitate that, right? There's a lot of talk about leveraging. So we talked about some of that tacit knowledge, right? And the formal knowledge,
Yeah.
informal knowledge. That type of
I like
stuff.
how you refer to it as tribal knowledge.
Right. So that's where like mentorship from people who have been experienced in these times where they've had to be flexible.
Yeah.
Where they can help to foster adaptability with other, people who may be less experienced or have fewer knowledge, skills, or abilities, because they're newer or something like that.
Sure. That I think is one of the great things about apprenticeship programs or learning on the job type of programs, internships, is that you get some kind of structured knowledge, but also an opportunity to just pick up a lot of that tribal knowledge as you go.
Absolutely. Yeah. But unfortunately, we're at a time where we have so many people leaving the workforce because of retirement or other things that are happening out there, from the external, political, and economical,
environmental,
societal,
technical,
all those legal things and all that, right? And then there's internal things that are happening in organizations too. Inflation and tariffs and, just other.
Well, finding qualified people is always a challenge, and I think more so right now in many industries.
Right.
And so that's an area where if your organization is a little bit more adaptable, maybe you're going to be in better straits.
Yeah. Yep.
Which should we take all of that and then start applying it to designing an organization, to building those processes and procedures, organizational structures in a way that allows for some of that adaptability holistically, but then flexibility in situational areas?
I like it. Yeah.
Okay.
Should we take a break before we do that?
You, sir, are the professor, so I'm going to sit back and open up my notepad and let you profess.
You, sir, are the MBAs.
I think you
Lead
have
the
one
way,
of those
man.
too. You've got a lot of 3-letter acronyms and 4-letter acronyms. So.
Well,
Okay. Let's take a break.
Let's take a break. When we come back, let's try to put some of that together. Hey, look, the thing is, it's the industrial organizational psychology answer that you're always going to hear is it depends, right? So it is.
Well, that's the classic MBA answer. I think
that's true. Yeah.
Gobsmacking amounts of money for an MBA, and all I learned is it depends.
It depends, right?
My professors are going to kill me, but at the end of the day, it's sort of like, can you say that sounding very seriously, charging a lot of money with a suit and tie on?
Yeah, well, we did. All right. We'll be right back.
Meet Hermie the HR Hermit Crab. Laugh, learn, and lead better with Hermie. Hermie is here to tackle workplace madness with heart and humor from Harmonious Workplaces. He's perfect for HR pros, leaders, and change makers. Hermie teaches workplace lessons through cartoons and is great for team discussions and workshops. Get your copy on Amazon now. www.hermiehrhermitcrab.com. Again, that's hermiehrhermitcrab.com.
And we're back. So talking about adaptability, talking about flexibility, how do we help organizations to pick the right structure, if that's even a thing that they can do?
Right. I think we were talking about designing the structure that's best fit for your organization's goals,
Right.
and the
Well,
industry that you're in is going to impact that. But the idea that you can have some control, I guess, or some intentionality about building a structure, building systems, building processes that will help you be as adaptable as possible in the right ways, help you be as flexible as possible in the right ways. And so maybe we could dig into that a little bit. And
sure.
the idea of that being that you create these systems and structures and processes and all of that so that your organization is getting to a point of resiliency. And so that when change comes or when a big event happens in the marketplace, you can react to that in a way that is as productive and possible, as
Right.
opposed to turtling and going out of business very quickly.
Yeah. Well, talking about intentionality, right? There is some research about having modular and cross-functional structures that are so basically the company can have an operational structure that as they're moving, but when they need to adapt, they can shift to an intentional different structure, if that makes sense, to be able to handle what needs to happen. So there's this intentional design to handle whether it's a task force or a team or some other type of arguably flatter structure, or sometimes it might even be a more rigid structure, right? It might be something that could be more clinical to
Mm-hmm.
some extent, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you have these available that people are trained in how these are going to operate
Mm-hmm.
when something happens. If does that make sense?
Yeah. It's kind of
Yeah.
like a SWAT team, if you will.
Yeah. So having these kind of, let's see, I'm going to say it anyway, Lego type of situations where we're gonna put this structure into place to to handle this particular thing, and then we can sometimes like a SWAT team, you debrief and disband and go back to business as usual, right? So there's again task forces like that, if that makes sense.
Right. And just to define that one, SWAT, SWAT, Special Weapons and Tactics. A lot of organizations have adopted that term to essentially say we're going to throw our best and brightest at this to try to solve whatever is coming our way
Right.
in a very quick, rapid time frame.
And as part of that intentionality and part of that, picking the best and the brightest and, or at least the people who are
That's the idea.
most
Sometimes it
fit.
winds up being the last man standing or the last
That's
woman
true
standing.
too.
But,
Right. The one
in
who,
theory, it's best and brightest.
right. The sometimes it's the ones that did not stand back.
No,
When they
the
were
people
picking
who happen
teams.
to not be on vacation that day.
Right. But knowing, doing an assessment of knowing who's on the team, what they bring, what their
Mhm.
motivations are, so there are
Yeah.
assessment tools that can help organizations learn that, but also house that and keep that information available to be able to when you have to use one of these modular structures.
Yeah.
to pick the people we need to put in there,
Mhm.
or understand we have a gap here. How do we fill that gap with somebody interim or somebody kind of more permanent?
Right. And even just knowing that can be so valuable. Having the
Sure.
expertise to know, oh, this is a problem that we need legal help with, or this is a problem we need finance help with, or this is a problem it's a operational type of concern. So let's bring in someone from our ops team.
Right.
Just knowing that can be very helpful.
Yeah.
Where I thought you were going to go is somewhere totally different. In
Oh,
many of our prior episodes, we've talked about the benefits of having cross-functional teams with people from different parts of the business,
oh, sure.
and even intentionally trying to make our teams as diverse as possible in terms of makeup of who's on that team, not just which department they come from, but their personal backgrounds and things like that, where all of that brings such a vast amount of diverse knowledge and various knowledge points and various points of expertise to whatever you're trying to do. And sometimes that can be just steady state meetings. Sometimes that can be some of these more project based teams or task forces, things like that. But
Sure.
having a broad sense of different capabilities from around the organization can really help as you're trying to dig into what an issue might be or why something is happening, how to solve for it in the best way possible. Because you can imagine one department's going to say, well, I think we should do X. And another department says, well, that's great. But if you do that, that's going to cause a bigger problem over here. So
Sure.
it's sort of an exercise in that type of thing.
Feels like Ocean's 11, Ben.
Can I be the Sammy Davis Jr. character?
Sure.
Um,
But yeah, you're right. I mean, I personally a fan of using, having diversity within teams, particularly those where there are just decisions that need to be made.
Yeah.
There's a lot of research out there about, making better decisions because of conflict
Yeah.
that can happen within.
Or just, it could be conflict for sure. It could also be just considerations of multiple perspectives that
Sure.
one person or one type of demographic is just never going to have that. It's just in this day and age, it's impossible. So you benefit by having various perspectives in the room that can help you understand a situation a little bit more
Yeah.
fullerly.
I like the first one. Just go with that.
So
Yeah.
okay, so I've derailed you quite deeply, but I
You
think,
did not
Rich, where
derail
you were
anything.
going is you were saying that there's ways to design parts of the organization so that you
Mhm.
have these kind of modular teams. There's a built-in modularity to the organization. So if
Right.
something happens or if we see an opportunity, we can quickly take advantage of these structures we have in place and we can build a very fit for purpose, cross-functional, knowledge aware type of team
Sure.
to come attack that. So there's that sort of built-in modularity, I think was the word you were using.
Yeah. But then if we
Um,
go back to earlier in the conversation to Danny
yeah,
Pinkham, right, there's also a certain degree of constraints within a system that we should keep in mind too, right? Because if we're going outside of the vision, mission, values, all those things that are, arguably in the corporate culture, um, and not to mention the voice of the customer, right?
mhm.
Then things are too much of, like you said, a wet noodle, right? You, you're just
Well,
way too flexible and
I I think on one of the prior episodes we were talking about adaptability. We were talking about just that, about how water tends to flow downhill or seek its own level, and it's still flowing within some kind of a channel, or there's still
right,
banks to the river.
yeah,
And it's that same kind of thing. Most systems are going to have some sort of natural parameters around them. And
right,
I think where you're going sort of makes me think that you need to have some ability to color outside the lines, but you have to know when it's okay to color outside of them and which lines you can color outside of and which
Yeah,
lines you can't color outside of. And so
sure.
some of that is procedural, process driven. Some of that is that tacit tribal knowledge. And the magic happens when you put those two together in the right way.
It's to some extent some degree of autonomy, which we talked about as being important for motivation, but within the constraints of what we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to achieve, right? It's akin to going back to a musical reference, right? Playing jazz or the blues and improvisation to fill out the song, but you still have a song for it,
Right. As
if that
opposed
makes
to
sense.
the musicians just doing whatever they want, whatever
Right,
key signature, whatever tempo, and it's just noise.
right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. That's a great
yeah.
example. Okay, so we've got some of these structures that we can build in so that the organization can be more modular and flexible. You can, like we were just saying, you can do that to a point, or you get a little bit too much of that flexibility and then you just have nothing.
Right.
And so part of that then is where I think you're going is knowing which things need to be a little bit more fixed and which
Mm-hmm.
things can be a little bit more uh, flexible or adaptable.
Right,
So
right.
we were talking at the beginning of the show about a manufacturing line. Once you know what you're making and that you know it's the right thing, you want that to
A-
be as
right.
standard as possible.
And you're
Whereas,
tooled that way and all of that
yep,
stuff,
your
right?
tool, and
Yeah, yeah.
sometimes it can be very expensive and costly to change that. So
Sure.
you want to change that in a way that's very intentional.
Right,
Whereas you want to be able to fix that very quickly so that you're back to that same thing that you're making.
right.
Whereas in maybe a customer discovery type of environment
Mm-hmm.
or an innovation environment or
Right,
a troubleshooting environment, you might want to have a little bit more of that flexibility to
right.
say, well, don't know exactly what our next widget's going to be, or we have a sense.
Sure.
Do we take it this way or that way?
Right.
And
But
that's
we
where
still have,
that's
but there's still constraints within.
there are still constraints, but I think the boundaries are maybe a little bit looser or
Yeah,
broader
sure.
or wider. And only when you have a little bit more certainty do you start to narrow those boundaries. And then you wind up with you're tooling a new production line,
Right.
you're producing a new type of widget, you're delivering a new type of service, whatever. And that's going to be a little bit more fixed.
That's nice. That's You put a
Yeah.
tidy bow on that, Ben. Thank you, sir. All right. Well, I think we've come up to just about the end here. So, any last words for the audience today?
Well, we've teased that all of this adaptability can help an organization be more resilient,
Mhm.
and that the more resilient you are, the better you are as an organization to handle market stresses and fluctuations and even black swan events. And
Sure.
so maybe we dig into that a little more next time.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah. How the outcome of your adaptability can help your position. Is that kind of where
Yeah,
you're
I mean,
thinking?
I think where our arc has taken us so far is we've talked about what adaptability is, why it's important, how to
Hmm.
help people on teams become more adaptable. We've talked about the benefits of having an adaptable organization and flexibility within certain parts of the organization. All of that is wonderful.
Right.
Why are we doing that?
But
What's the end game?
right. What does all
Right. And
that mean?
so what's the purpose of designing these systems or training our people in a certain way? And
Yeah.
maybe we spend a little bit of time kind of just digging. We've teased at it. We've talked about how in the end of the day it can help you boost revenue or reduce costs, which is much of what this all boils down to
Sure.
in a very, very crude way.
Right.
But let's see, maybe we talk about that a little bit more. And as usual, if people are feeling like they want to chime in, send a note, let us know what we got right, what we got wrong.
Yep.
Let us
Let
know
us
if you
know
have a
your
question
stories
for
too.
Hermie the Hermit Crab. Or
I
if
love
Hermie
it.
doesn't know, maybe in this case we take it to Boss Betta. And
Oh
Boss Betta
boy.
can tell you the most rigid and unadaptable way to solve that problem.
Maybe, maybe Boss Bennett needs to have his own form. And see what he comes up. Like, very good.
Cool.
Cool. All right, folks.
One.
Well, tune into us next time. Go to harmoniousworkplaces.com where you'll find all 78 prior episodes and this one. You'll also find Herbie the HR Hermit Crab at on that website, as well as hermiehrhermitcrab.com. And until we meet again, make change your friend.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode. To contact Rich or Cheryl, please visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com. To connect with Ben, find him on LinkedIn or visit at www.harborsidestrategy.com.